Thanks for joining us on Shannon's Club TV, the program celebrating cars in Australia for their achievements on the road and in competition. You can catch up on previous episodes on the Shannon's Club website, where you can also connect with other motoring enthusiasts.
Coming up on the show, we'll get the latest news from the Shannon's auctions team, and we meet a proud owner of our feature car. But right now, let's take a look at the car that brought the excitement of the racetrack to affordable, everyday motoring, the Lotus Cortina.
The Lotus Cortina came from an era before design labels were spread around like rubber stamps. Because it was a genuine Lotus based on Ford's groundbreaking Cortina of 1962, it was also the perfect showcase for the everyday Cortina. Designated Type 28, it arrived between the Type 27 Formula Junior Open Wheeler and Type 29, the first Lotus Indianapolis racer. The Lotus Cortina was the product of two benchmark developments. The new Ford-based twin-cam engine developed for the Type 26 Lotus Elan was a natural fit for the new Cortina's state-of-the-art unitary body that cut weight and added strength. Mark, if the Mini Cooper was the first budget racer that challenged the Jaguars and the big Galaxies, the Lotus Cortina must have completed that process.
Yeah, it really took it up a notch. I mean, the Mini Cooper was the first successful budget racer, but the Lotus Cortina really raised the bar. I mean, this was the closest thing you could get to a Clubman sports car in a sedan car body. And with Colin Chapman's involvement, of course, everything had to be super lightweight. You know, lightweight body panels, lightweight drivetrain components, had that multi-link coil sprung rear end, which certainly had its critics. The bottom line is it had a fantastic power to weight ratio, and it was an incredibly successful car.
And that twin cam engine in a Cortina was quite exotic.
Yeah, it was just an amazing package.
Until the Cortina GT and the Lotus Cortina made their presence felt on Australian racetracks, the global advances that the first Cortina Mark I represented were not fully understood by Australians. Although it appeared conventional, the Cortina was the first small Ford to benefit from the latest stress engineering principles and calculations in supersonic aircraft and helicopters. Meanwhile, Lotus founder Colin Chapman saw the potential of adding a twin-cam head to Ford's stock 1.5 litre block for racing the new Elan sports car in the 1.5 litre European FIA class, later raised to 1.6 litres. Ex-Coventry Climax man Harry Mundy designed the head before Lotus commissioned Cosworth to rework it for Ford blocks. Once Ford saw the potential in installing this new engine in the Cortina, Lotus was given the job of building the Lotus Cortina as Ford was too busy meeting exploding global Cortina demand. The Lotus association with Formula One and Indianapolis added immediate credibility to the base Cortina. The Lotus Cortina was a win-win for all parties before it even turned a wheel. Despite early success, the Lotus suspension in early Lotus Cortinas was not strong enough. As Ford improved the production Cortinas, the extra commonality in suspension and driveline parts in later cars not only made the Lotus Cortina tougher and more reliable, the everyday Cortina buyer was a winner as well. The Lotus Cortina carved out an amazing profile and certainly helped sell the breed, Mark, and no more so in Australia, where it wasn't even available to the public.
Yeah, it was incredible. But, you know, guys like Bob Jane, the Gagan brothers, Alan Moffat, they all still managed to get their hands on a car for the racetrack. But I reckon a guy by the name of Jim McEwen left the most lasting impression of all. Back in the 1960s, racing great Alan Moffat claimed that Jim McEwen had the world's fastest Mark I Lotus Cortina. Now that was quite an accolade, given that Australia was a motor racing backwater at a time when the lightweight Lotus Tweak Cortina was Ford's frontline weapon in small bore sedan racing and rallying around the globe. However, Moffat was well qualified to make such a judgment, as he really had his finger on the pulse of Lotus Cortina performance in Australia and overseas. So he was able to directly compare his ex-Team Lotus factory car against not only McEwen's example, but those raced by Bob Jane and the Gagan brothers. McEwen's locally developed version of the Ford-based 1.6 litre twin-cam 4 went a lot further than just cutting-edge camshaft and valve development. The engine was stretched to its limits in every dimension, resulting in a mini monster motor with close to 200 brake horsepower, which was way ahead of the best engines from the UK. Joe, even though the Lotus Cortina was not available in Australian Ford showrooms, McEwen's racing successes must have been a big image boost for the standard Cortina range, particularly amongst young buyers at the time.
Well, you're right, because in the early 60s, young Australians were hooked on Volkswagens and Minis. They were the two biggest sellers. Ford, until that stage, sold the Prefect, which was known as the Defect.
That's right.
And this Cortina arrived in the middle of all of this, and it really didn't have any history. There was the Anglia, of course, which is a great little car.
Yeah, great car.
But no one really understood the Cortina. And so the efforts of Jim McEwen and others like him, they just placed that Cortina exactly where Ford needed.
Yeah.
And no one ever questioned it again.
Yeah, would have been most impressive. In early 1964, McEwen was invited to join a new three-car team that had been put together by Norm Beechey. With backing from Neptune, a subsidiary brand of oil giant Shell, the newly formed Neptune racing team had great spectator appeal by representing the three most popular makes at the time, with Beechey in a hot Holden EHS4, McEwen in his Ford Lotus Cortina, and Peter Manton's giant-killing BMC Mini Cooper S. The record books show that McEwen's Lotus Cortina was a standout performer, with a staggering race-winning ratio of around 90%. The Victorian Ace won numerous state touring car championship titles and smashed 1.6 litre class lap records at every track he raced on. A stunning achievement in a locally developed car that raised eyebrows around the world. You can read many other great road and race stories on the Shannons Club website.
My name's Tony Delaveris. The car is a 1964 Lotus Cortina. I've had the car for 5 years. It came from Japan and an Australian guy owned it over there. It was an ex-race car in Japan. Since I bought the car, I put it back to road trim to make it roadworthy for the road. I like the shape mainly. I've had a few over the years, but my first car was the normal Cortina. Well, this Lotus Cortina has got a twin overhead cam engine, 2 side draft Webers, it runs a close ratio 4-speed gearbox and the normal Cortina diff at the back. It's sort of got bars top and bottom to mount onto the diff and the subframe and all the track rods that come with it. It's got the A-frame rear end, it's not the leaf springs like normal Cortinas have. It's a different rear end to the normal Cortina. My favourite thing with this car is the twin cam engine with the side draft Webers. It sounds really good when the revs are up. Yeah, it is pretty rare because there are not many left in the world now. I think they made over 1,000 worldwide on the Mark 1s. The future with this car is I want to keep it as long as I can. I enjoy the car, I do a lot of club events with it. I can remember a trip to Walhalla with my wife in the car. It was a nice weekend going through that little township and enjoying all the rest of the club guys' company. Well, the driving experience takes me back to my youth. It's not a new car to drive, it drives like a 64 car. But you forgive all that because it's still nice to drive and enjoy. And I've just gone back to my youth again.
Well, Shannon's National Auctions Manager Chris Borabon joins us. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Hi, Chris. Lotus Cortina, 2 levels. Very rare car that was never sold here in Australia, but there's been a steady trickle on the racetrack and for collectors. And the Mark 1 Cortina, which was built here, there seems to be a bit of a relationship going on.
Or like a trickle-down
Yeah,
type
like
effect.
hero car.
Yeah, we've seen that, haven't we? I think the rarity of the Lotus Cortina has definitely helped the values of the Mark 1 Cortina. So yeah, we've definitely seen that effect happening.
And the Lotus Cortina really hasn't disappeared from sight, has it?
No. Look, I think there's a good, strong following worldwide for these cars, and I think the rarity and scarcity of these cars have, really helped that.
So if you want a Lotus Cortina, what's the buying advice?
I think if you see one, really just jump on it
Just
and
grab it, yeah.
because they so rarely come up on a market. I mean, we really don't see any coming up for sale at auction. We have had the occasional Mark 1 Cortina come up, but Lotus Cortina is very rare to come up.
What about maintenance issues? I mean, I remember when the Colin Chapman, the whole thing about Lotus cars was if they fell apart as he crossed the finish line, they were right because they were just not too heavy. I mean, what are they like in terms of day-to-day service?
Yeah, look, mechanically they're fairly easy. I mean, the running gear is shared across a few different platforms, so that's not the issue. I think body parts are probably getting a bit scarce for the Mark 1s these days, so that's probably the issue. I think with a lot of owners, we're seeing that probably there's a few less on track here in Australia because they just really don't want to damage the cars.
Well, it seemed like the Cortina was the ultimate disposable car, and there just didn't seem to be any end of the dilapidated cars that you could always rip parts off. They're finished.
Yeah, that's right.
And the guys who used to race their cars and didn't care about a bit of biffo, all of a sudden,
today they're treasured.
Yes, they're
absolutely.
treasured.
So the bottom line is if you see one in Australia, grab it.
Grab it.
And
jump
even
on
a good standard Mark 1 Cortina, grab it. Still worth grabbing.
Absolutely. Yeah, great car.
Well, thanks for joining us, Chris. And keep in mind, you can keep up to date with all the latest Shannon's Auctions news on the Shannon's Club website.
If you'd like a lasting image of any car you've seen on the show, visit autopics.com.au.
Joe, the Lotus Cortina Mark 1, I mean, it's a lasting legacy in terms of its impact on Australia, isn't it?
We've never seen anything like it. You add Harry Firth's efforts in establishing the Cortina GT. So you saw it at production car level, and then at this touring car level, Appendix J, you saw the Lotus Cortina. So wherever you went to a race meeting, you saw this unknown car dominating at every level, and there's no doubt that it established a performance pedigree in Ford Australia that set up the Falcon GTs. I think it's a fair comment to say we wouldn't have seen that level of involvement if it wasn't for the success of those Cortinas.
Yeah, well, certainly that was the era of total performance by Ford. So there was very much mixing with the brand.
And they had to wait until the Falcon was ready. So it just did so much in that time period.
Yeah, fantastic car. Well, we hope you've enjoyed this nostalgic look at the Ford Lotus Cortina. We look forward to your company next time on Shannon's Club TV. Bye for now.